We sat down with Fort Smith historian Sherry Toliver and talked about the history of Fort Smith and how the Black community made an impact in the region since its beginning, and how we can make better decisions in the future by learning from the past.
My name is Sherry Toliver, Brown, Sherry Brown Toliver. Brown is my maiden name. And I did grow up in Fort Smith, Arkansas. I grew up here and went to all-black high school, Lincoln High School. We haven't had any bad things happen in Fort, even during the integration period, you know, the civil rights marches and all that. And one of the things about Black history is so big. Fort Smith Black history in general, it's a huge subject to talk about because there's so many different aspects of it. Well, first of all, when Fort Smith was founded in 1817, Fort Smith was founded, and the boat that landed at the Arkansas River, there were 3 or 4 Black men, seamen, crewmen on that boat. So Black people have been in this area for ever since it started. And then in the Civil War, in 1863 and 64 and like that, a lot of the enslaved African Americans left slavery to join the North to fight in the Civil War. And my great-grandfather was one of those enslaved men. His name was Amos Adams, and he fought in the Civil War. And I have his pension file from the United States Archives. And so that started me kind of on my journey of wanting to learn more about the history of Black people in this area. And so I'm very proud to be a descendant of a Civil War soldier. And anyway, after that period of time, a lot of those Blacks stayed in the area after the Civil War. And so those people who stayed, those men, they married, they stayed in this area. And around 1850, I guess, they had smaller schools, probably home schools for children, but they didn't have any public school until 1887. And 2 public schools were built at that time in Fort Smith. One was Bell Point for white children, and the other one was Howard School for Black children. But Howard and Lincoln are linked from that period of time, because Howard it educated children from the 1st through the 12th grades, that school. And then they got other schools. Other schools were built because the population kept growing. And so they built Lincoln in 1900, that period, 1898 to 1900, during that period. And it was actually the grade school. They turned it into the grade school, and Howard was a high school. The first graduation of Howard High School, Judge Isaac Parker, who was the hanging judge, they called him, and Judge Parker gave out the first diplomas to those 9 graduates, Black graduates, and that's a part of history. The school was in existence from 1900 to 1966, when schools were integrated. And it's an interesting story and a lot of history about how it came about here in Fort Smith, because they fought it tooth and nail. They did not want to be integrated at all. And so there was a lawsuit. Ms. Corrine Rogers wanted her daughters to graduate from Fort Smith High School, which was the all-white high school. And so they were turned down. And so she filed a lawsuit in conjunction with the NAACP, Dr. H.P. McDonald, who was a Black doctor here at that time, very prominent. So they got together and they filed this lawsuit. Well, there were 13 families involved at first, but as time went on, they got afraid, you know, and that their husbands would lose their jobs, they would be ostracized, they wouldn't be treated well in the community for doing this. As it came down to the end, Ms. Corrine Rogers was the only one left that stood her ground and stayed there. And of course, a couple of years passed. It went all the way to the Supreme Court again, though. And they determined that that was not right, and that they would do it immediately. And one of her daughters, she had about 9 children, I think, she and her husband. But Patricia Rogers was, and a girl named Mary Davis. And they're both their families. They still have family here in Fort Smith. But they were the first black graduates of Northside High School.